Hello everyone! Welcome to today's video from Tank Encyclopedia. I'm Sophie Line, and I'm going to present the article on the 30.5cm L16 Selbstverlaufete bear. The article for this video is linked in the description below. Check it out and subscribe to this channel for more educational videos on the subject of historical armored vehicles. After the Battle of Stalingrad ended in February 1943, a great effort was made by Germany to develop heavily armored vehicles armed to be more effective at assaulting fortified positions and buildings, particularly in urban environments. The realization that such a vehicle was required came soon after fighting in Stalingrad began, and the straightforward solution to this problem was presented at Hitler's conference on the 20th September 1942. Fighting in Stalingrad has clearly resulted in the necessity of having a heavy gun in a heavily armored vehicle to fire high explosive shells capable of destroying entire houses with only a few rounds. The initial result of this calling was the SturmInfanterieGeschütz 33B, a variant of the StuG III assault gun with a heavily modified box-like casemate, armed with a 15cm SturmInfanterieGeschütz 33/1 howitzer. With 80mm of frontal armor, the SturmInfanterieGeschütz 33B was capable of directly attacking fortified positions while still being adequately protected against return fire. 24 of these vehicles were completed by October 1942, with 12 of them being put into service by the end of the month, and the other 12 in November. Despite being optimized for demolition work, however, it would be far from the most powerful assault vehicle designs to come out of Germany during World War II. As though the SturmInfanterieGeschütz 33B was totally inadequate for its role as a demolition vehicle, 1943 would see the manufacturing firm Krupp propose a quintessential German wonder weapon. At a total combat weight of 120 tons, the 30.5cm L16 Selbstverlaufete bear was nothing short of a behemoth. As a Sturmwerfer intended to reduce enemy defensive positions to rubble anywhere from several kilometers away to direct fire at point-blank range, the bear, appropriately translated to bear in English, was to be matched in firepower only by towed siege artillery, railway guns, and the famous and slightly heavier Karl Garret siege mortar, all while having comparable armor protection to the Tiger II. Historian and author Michael Froelich states that the proposal for the 30.5cm bear was done on Krupp's own initiative without any requirements being issued to firms for such a vehicle. This is a good example of Germany's procurement system gradually breaking down as the war dragged on, as firms started to more frequently propose their own vehicle designs with homegrown requirements in the quest for more government contracts. Sources differ on when the 30.5cm bear was proposed. Historian and author Thomas Jens states that Krupp proposed the concept on the 4th of May 1943, and had completed a drawing of the vehicle on the 10th. However, Froelich states that the design was presented by Dr. Erich Müller, who was head of artillery development at Krupp, to the Waffenprüfämter 4/2 on the 11th of March 1943 under the designation SKA 758, and given the appropriate name, Bear. Bear was to be armed with a 30.5cm L16 siege mortar in a casemate located at the rear of the vehicle. The mortar itself weighed 8 tons and was mounted on a carriage weighing a further 6 tons, which was bolted onto the floor of the fighting compartment. Around the gun was a large curved mantlet weighing 2.5 tons. The mortar could be elevated up to 70 degrees, but couldn't be depressed further than 0 degrees. When horizontal at 0 degrees, the gun rested on a travel lock which featured a hinged cap that swung up to cover the muzzle of the mortar and lock it in place. The mortar could only traverse 2 degrees left or right, so when aiming, the entire vehicle would need to be turned to effectively get the mortar onto target. This issue was also faced by the French Char B1 heavy tank, which featured a hole-mounted 75mm gun that was fixed in traverse, so horizontal aiming was done purely by steering the tank. This issue was largely overcome with the development of a very sophisticated steering system which allowed very precise control of the tank during steering. Since the bear used a transmission not designed for that sort of precision, it is possible that accurate aiming at close range would have been difficult to achieve. However, it can be easily argued that at close range with a 30.5cm shell, aiming doesn't need to be that precise. At high elevation when firing at long range, accommodation had to be made for the massive breach of the mortar, which during recoil would travel a meter rearward through a hole in the whole floor. The mortar had a choice of 2 kinds of shell, a high explosive shell weighing 350 kilograms and an anti-concrete shell weighing 380 kilograms. The high explosive shell had a propellant charge of 50 kilograms and was estimated to achieve a muzzle velocity of 355 meters per second, with a maximum range of 10.5 kilometers. The anti-concrete shell had a 35 kilogram propellant charge and was estimated to achieve 345 meters per second, with a maximum range of 10 kilometers. Only 10 rounds were to be carried in the vehicle. However, this is not an unreasonably low number. As the shells each weighed hundreds of kilograms and a large winch mounted to the ceiling of the casemate was required to move and load them, the 2 loaders in the vehicle would have taken an exceptionally long time to load each shell, meaning the vehicle would not run out of ammo in any short amount of time. It would also not be unreasonable to expect very few targets to require more than 1 or 2 hits before they were no longer a threat. According to historian and author Fritz Hahn, the 30.5cm mortar was to be built by Škoda and would use ammunition that had already been manufactured as part of an old contract with Yugoslavia. No details about this contract are known, however. To take advantage of parts commonality, the 30.5cm Bear was to be built on a chassis that made use of components from both the Panther II and Tiger II. It would be powered by the Maybach HL230 found in the Panther, Tiger I, and Tiger II, providing 700 horsepower at 300 RPM. It would also use the L801 double differential steering system of the Tiger II, which was an upgraded version of the L600 found in the Tiger I, and the ZF-AK 7200 7-speed gearbox of the Panther. This would have given the Bear an estimated top speed of only 20 kilometers an hour. The reason for choosing the Panther's gearbox for the Bear is that on the 17th of February 1943, a proposal had been made recommending that Tiger II and Panther II should share a number of standardized components, including the engine, gearbox, and cooling system. During the time when Bear was being developed, this proposal was still in place, so considering Krupp's involvement in the development of Tiger II, it is to be expected that they would have been well aware of the advantages of including these standardized components in the Bear. Like both Tigers and the Panther, the transmission of Bear was located at the front of the vehicle, and because the casemate and gun were located at the rear of the vehicle, the engine and cooling system were located in the center of the vehicle in front of the casemate in a layout similar to the Ferdinand tank destroyer. As a very wide vehicle, the Bear's tracks followed the same design process of those of Tiger I and Tiger II, in that a set of narrow transport tracks would be fitted to allow the vehicle to be transported by rail or trailer, and a set of full-width combat tracks would be fitted while the vehicle was traveling under its own power. The transport tracks were to be 500mm wide, and the combat tracks would double that at 1000mm wide. In comparison, the Tiger II's tracks were 660mm and 800mm respectively. With the transport tracks fitted, the vehicle had a width of 3.27 meters, and with the combat tracks, this was increased to 4.1 meters. Despite the use of such wide tracks, at 120 tons, the Bear would have had very poor performance off-road, with a ground pressure estimated to be around 1.13 kilograms per square centimeter, compared to the Tiger II's 0.76 kilograms per square centimeter. The Bear featured overlapping 800mm road wheels, but it is not confirmed if it was to use the same sprocket and wheels as on Tiger II. However, as the vehicle was intended to standardize on components with Tiger II, it's reasonable to expect that they would. Hilary Doyle, in his illustration of the Bear, presents it as having the sprocket, idler, and steel-rimmed road wheels of Tiger II. This is supported by Thomas Jens describing the road wheels as rubber-cushioned, likely referring to the ring of rubber sandwiched under the wheel hub on either side of the wheel as a way to reduce wear without using rubber tires like those used on earlier Tiger I road wheels, which were prone to wear and contribute to rubber wastage. While both Tigers and the Panther used torsion bar suspension, which took up most of the space on their whole floors, Bear was instead to use leaf springs. It is not known what these suspension units would have looked like, but one of the main reasons for choosing leaf springs instead of torsion bars was to facilitate the inclusion of a base plate built into the rear of the whole floor. This design feature would not be possible if the Bear used transverse torsion bars under a false floor like the Tiger and Panther. Prior to firing, possibly only for high elevation during low-threat engagements, this base plate would be lowered onto the ground and locked in place. The purpose of this was to help absorb the massive amount of recoil generated by the gun during firing, which was estimated to reach around 160 tons of force. This design concept is present in some produced vehicles, such as the M55 and M110 self-propelled howitzer, both of which feature a large dozer-like plate at the rear of the vehicles which lower down onto the ground for the same purpose of absorbing recoil that could otherwise damage the vehicle, particularly the suspension. The hull of Bear greatly resembled that of the Tiger II in both shape and protection. The reason for such a level of protection was that, as an assault mortar, the Bear had to be capable of resisting incoming fire from some of the most powerful AT weapons of the time. The floor armor was also intended to protect against mines, a sensible concern for an assault vehicle. To achieve this, it had the following armor values. Upper hull front was 130mm at 55 degrees from vertical, lower hull front 100mm at 55 degrees from vertical, upper sides 80mm in flat transitioning into 80mm at 25 degrees from vertical, lower sides 80mm flat, rear hull 80mm at 30 degrees from vertical, The roof was 50mm, the front floor 60mm, rear floor 30mm. The mantlet ranged from 80 to 130mm. Casemate front was 130mm. The driver was positioned in the front left of the vehicle, and the radio operator was on the right. Each had a swing-out hatch like those found on the Panther and Tiger II, and a single rotatable periscope. Despite the intended use of the vehicle, the radio operator did not have a ball-mounted machine gun for close protection against infantry. In fact, no other weapon is described as being present on the vehicle, although it can be reasonably assumed the crew's personal weapons would be carried. Because of the placement of the engine, these two crewmen were physically separated from the rest of the crew who were in the rear fighting compartment. The commander and gunner were positioned on either side of the mortar, and each had their own swing-out style cupola with 8 periscopes. It is notable that because of the vehicle's 3.5-meter height, the cupola periscopes were angled downwards to reduce the massive blind spot that would otherwise be present all around the vehicle. The two loaders were positioned at the rear of the casemate, where they would operate the winch and load the mortar, and there was a hatch in the lower rear hole for them to enter or leave the vehicle. It should also be noted that in the drawing showing the interior layout of the Bear, what appears to be the elevation wheel for the mortar can be seen significantly below the positions of the gunner and commander on the gun carriage. This suggests two possible options. One option was that the gunner did not fight with his head up in the cupola, but he instead moved down next to the gun carriage and adjusted the mortar without actually seeing what he was aiming at himself, with the commander directing him using his own sight. A second possibility was that one or both of the loaders had a second duty in adjusting the mortar, and it was the gunner who directed them using his own sight. No actual gun sight is shown in the drawings. With the placement of the elevation wheel, it was not possible to be up in the cupola while adjusting the mortar. One other mysterious feature of the Bear shown in the drawing is the object protruding from the rear of the casemate. As it is shown with the shell inside it, it can be assumed to have been some kind of loading tray for loading shells into the vehicle and then stowed in their ready racks. What is not clear, however, is how it functioned. The rear of the object appears to be a wall the same thickness as the armor on the rear of the casemate, suggesting the object slid inwards into the vehicle much like a drawer, so that the rear was flush with the armor. If that was the case, it is not known if this drawer action was done specifically to move the shells into the vehicle where they were then moved by the internal winch, or if the tray stayed in place during loading, and the shells were manually pushed in from the outside, or were pulled in by some kind of mechanical rammer. The loading process would have been time-consuming, and undoubtedly would require the assistance of a munitions schlepper with its own external crane, much like the munition schleppers that accompanied the Karlgerät siege mortars. This is supported by Fritz Hahn, who states the Bear would indeed be supported by specialist ammunition-carrying vehicles. However, no other descriptions of this vehicle are provided. Hahn also states that a lighter version of the Bear had been designed, weighing significantly less at 95 tons. However, once again, no other details are provided. This is likely because Hahn wrote about the vehicle 4 decades after World War II ended while relying mostly on his recollections, and with his personal experience not being related to armored vehicles, without evidence, it is highly likely that this claim is not accurate. As a unique and imposing vehicle, the Bear has proved popular among scale modelers, with modeling companies such as Amusing Hobby and Trumpeter producing their own model kits of the vehicle. However, a number of inexplicable inaccuracies are present in the models of both the aforementioned modeling companies. These include the presence of a hull-mounted ball machine gun. While heavily inspired by the Tiger II, there is no evidence that the Bear possessed a hull machine gun. A single cupola. While it is a sensible change to an impractical design, the Bear did not feature one cupola on the casemate roof, but a pair. As well as this, the cupolas on these models are not correctly designed, in that the periscopes are not angled downwards to increase visibility, unlike the periscopes of the original design. Fully sloped upper side armor. According to Doyle's drawings for the Bear, the lower half of the sponson side armor was to be vertical, with the rest of the upper side armor all the way to the casemate roof being sloped at 25 degrees. There's no primary evidence that the Bear's sponsons were fully sloped like that of Panther or Tiger II. A complex cast casemate face. One of the most glaring changes to the Bear's design and models is the presence of a large complex cast piece as the casemate's frontal armor. There is no evidence to support such a design. While the Bear's actual casemate face is highly curved in the vertical plane, it is completely straight in the horizontal plane. A comparable existing design would be that of the Mouse, whose turret face very much resembles the shape of the Bear's casemate face. This was produced by bending a straight armor plate using a huge metal press. On the 27th of May 1943, in a meeting between the manufacturing firm Alket and the Waffen Commission, Alket revealed plans for a competing design in the form of a self-propelled 38cm mortar. Development for the vehicle was approved, and by October, the first prototype, a 38cm rocket launcher mounted in a casemate built on a Tiger I chassis, was built and presented to Hitler. This vehicle would see further development and entered production as the 38cm RW61 auf SturmInfanterieGeschütz. It is more commonly known as the SturmTiger. 30.5cm Bear seemingly ceased development sometime after Alcat revealed their competing design, and it is not hard to understand why. At 120 tons, it was significantly underpowered, and despite its enormous tracks, would have had poor mobility and would have been vulnerable to sinking on anything but hard ground. While it could have been technically capable of fulfilling its intended role, the SturmTiger demonstrated that the role could be more effectively filled by a vehicle half the size and weight, without requiring vast resources to function. With the existence of a later blueprint showing a significantly altered design, it is very possible that development of the Bear actually continued even after the introduction of the SturmTiger, until at least December 1944.